We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style, and so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
This is a very interesting question.
The Bubb Report with Dr. Kellan Bubb. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of the Bubb Report. Of course, this is the first Sunday in June, and we're happy that you can join us for this Sunday. Of course, as you're coming into the room, please make sure to like and share this week's live stream. If you're over on YouTube, please do us a favor by subscribing to our YouTube page. And of course, we also want to take this time to welcome our concurrent viewers on WPG10 television, who are also joining us as well. So we thank WPG10 for streaming the Bubb Report over on their platform. Now, as we get into the editorial, in the age of ChatGPT, dopamine social media feeds and instant answers, is the slow art of reading still worth it? Now, a few years ago, we were worried about Google making us lazy. And today we ask ChatGPT to summarize entire books, answer existential questions, write our essays, generate our brand ideas, even script our YouTube videos. Now, while artificial intelligence may be an efficient tool for processing reams of data that the human mind may take longer to complete, it comes with the downside of restricting the development of critical thinking skills. Now, the more humans use machines to do the thinking for them, is the more dependent on these machines they will become, distributing key cognitive processes. Now, using AI to make the shortcut to an answer instead of figuring it out on our own, in fact, lowers our cognitive reserve or connections between healthy brain cells. Now, the cognitive reserve hypothesis reflects how agile our brain is in solving problems and coping with challenges. Now, establishing and maintaining the connection between your brain cells requires the regular use of brain stimulating activities. Now, of course, this can be done by learning new information and processing information on a deeper level, or by doing anything intellectually challenging. Now, relying on AI effectively skips the challenge and gives someone an answer without needing to think through the question or problem. Now, instead of conducting thorough research on a topic and compiling information from multiple credible sources to complete an assignment, things like applications like ChatGPT, allows us to plug in a prompt and immediately get a simple, organized, and easily understandable answer. Now, when we depend on getting these quick and easy answers with the click of a button, our brain cells fail to form new connections, and many are lost in the process. Now, as a result, they don't develop the critical thinking abilities that are instrumental to their futures. Now, a major component of the brain that is correlated with both learning and Alzheimer's disease is cognitive reserve, which refers to the mind's resistance to damage and the storage of information. Now, having a strong cognitive reserve allows your brain to function and cope with those changes. The most commonly used parts of the cognitive reserve are education and cognitively complex occupations. Now, according to the U.S. National Library of Medicine and National Institutes of Health, lifetime exposure to educational and occupational achievement can increase cognitive reserve and reduce the risk of dementia over time. Reading, therefore, is a task that we learn during our childhood, but it must not be a task that we should stop engaging in. So, folks, what are you reading today? And of course, this is the Bubb Report. We'll be back for the very first segment of the program. Please stand by.
Tell as a commissioner of police, tell the politician, back off. You have no knowledge of the law. You have no knowledge of law enforcement. You cannot force my officers to do the wrong thing.
But that is somebody's son. That is somebody's child. That is part of a family. And I think that is the part that they are missing out.
Because E and F are apt to be used oppressively.
It's like because we don't see disabled people as sexual beings, which is ridiculous.
You mean they don't want to listen to your version of science? They have their own science. You have your science.
What we need to do is teach people to think and not what to think.
Today, it's too bad that everybody do what they want.
If I could forgive Bernard Ford, then I could forgive Bob Morris too. And today, on this day, I no more have anything in my heart for what he did.
The education system has to be very fluid and dynamic because we're living in very different and changing times.
Treating all your citizens equally, all your citizens fairly, recognizing each group, not discriminating against one or the other.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And folks, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Of course, if you're just joining us, please remember to like and share this week's live stream. We do have currently over on YouTube close to 90 people on the stream. So I encourage you, those of you over on YouTube, to please hit that like button so that others can have an opportunity to participate in this week's Bubb Report. Now, for the first segment of our program, we are happy to be joined by the outgoing Chief Executive Officer of the Grenada Tourism Authority, Ms. Petra Roach. Now, Ms. Roach joined the authority at a fraught time for Grenadian tourism on the back end of the COVID-19 pandemic, which put Grenadian and Caribbean tourism on ice, essentially. Now, Roach led Grenadian tourism through its pandemic recovery process with an emphasis on innovative and competitive marketing campaigns, as well as really looking into enhancing airlift into the destination. Petra Roach brought to Grenada vast amounts of expertise, having previously served at the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. for 27 years. Now, during her tenure at the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., Ms. Roach held various positions, including Vice President of Marketing and Sales for the United Kingdom, Director of Sales and Marketing for the US, Global Head of Markets, and Interim CEO. She successfully elevated the Barbados brand to its current heights and has been instrumental in Barbados's increase in airlift. Now, the same can be said about her legacy following her service in Grenada as well. Now, her depth of knowledge of both marketing and the tourism industry was a welcome skill set at the Grenada Tourism Authority. Now, we're happy to be joined by Ms. Petra Roach for this wonderful, what I call an exit interview during her time in Grenada at the Tourism Authority. Ms. Roach, welcome to the Bubb Report.
And good morning, Dr. Bubb. So happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And I look forward to having a very robust and interesting conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So now I guess you'll be visiting Grenada as a tourist.
Well, I'm not quite finished yet. I actually finish up on June the 30th. So until then, I'm actually at the minute in Atlanta because, as you're aware, we've got the start of the Delta service in December. So that's a very, very big opportunity, but it's also, you know, a very rich task because we've got daily service. So we're bringing about 22,000 seats into the market. So this week we're going to be having interviews, meeting with the travel trade here, meeting with Delta and Delta Vacations, and really just making sure that the visibility of Grenada and the awareness of that flight is everywhere.
So let us talk about that flight, because that flight is coming from much fanfare for Grenadians who reside in the Atlanta metro area, and of course Grenadians who reside in that part of the U.S. We're talking southern U.S., we're talking Florida, northern Florida, and things like that, and they really welcome that service. So we know that that service starts in the winter, correct?
Yeah, it starts on December the 20th, and we're going to have daily service from the 20th through to January the 4th. And then from January 4th through to April the 5th, it actually goes to 5 times weekly. And then we start back April the 5th through to the 12th on a daily service. And I think what's really important as well is that we have to ensure the success of that route, because then that informs whether or not they actually have a summer service and whether or not they then have another service in 2024. You know, that Atlanta hub, the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, it's the busiest.
It's a major hub. It's the busiest airport in the world, yeah.
So you've got like over 1,000 flights happening per day. You've got connectivity with 225 regional and international airports. You've got, you know, a big African-American community in that Atlanta hub, over 6 million people. You've got a large Grenadian diaspora. So we really are very, very privileged to be given this at a time when actually airlines are being very careful and very strategic in terms of where they expand into. They've had a very difficult time. Obviously, COVID happened. They've looked at their bottom lines. They've had so many challenges in terms of delivery of aircraft, etc. So I feel that there is that underlying confidence in Grenada as a destination that they've given us this. And, you know, people talk about revenue guarantees, etc. And we simply are going to be investing funds into marketing rather than paying a revenue guarantee.
Absolutely. And that appears to have been one of the hallmarks of your time in Grenada. So let us talk about, now that you mentioned marketing here, let us talk about the various aspects of marketing that you engage with outside of what we know as the traditional marketing, using, for example, the advertising route, perhaps attending travel market events. What we've seen during your tenure is, for example, we've seen the influencers, we've seen the reality show stars come to Grenada. we've seen that aspect of it where you have that sort of personal testimonial marketing from actual people who visit the destination and who then talk about their time there. So could you talk about the role that you played in respect of marketing Grenada as a premier tourist destination?
Well, again, as you mentioned before, I came in just when COVID was, the conversation, and it was such a difficult time. I don't know. I think a lot of people have forgotten just how complex and frustrating COVID was, because we didn't have a blueprint for what we were doing. It had never happened before. There were so many factors that needed to be moved into the equation. But I feel that Grenada, in terms of what our DNA is, it was just really leaning into things like authenticity, wellness, wide open spaces, landscape, majestic landscape, etc. So what we did was we worked to redefine the narrative, and really it was about broadening the scope of tourism so that we could reflect Grenada's full identity. We intentionally brought agriculture and heritage and culture into that tourism conversation, highlighting not just what Grenada is as a destination, but also what it stands for. So we moved away from that sort of transactional marketing to something that was far more human. And there's something which is called emotionally resonant marketing. And that's where you don't just simply promote features, but you create a deep emotional connection with the audience. And in the context of tourism, you're talking about storytelling, like, reflecting their values, so sustainability, authenticity, cultural depth. You're touching people's emotions and aspirations. So you're talking about escape and transformation, healing and joy. So our marketing really was about real storytelling, and we invited travelers to come in and see themselves in our communities. Community tourism is a real thing in Grenada, and we need to hold on to it. It underpins that whole safety element. It gives people the ability to, transmute into other people's way of life. And I feel that one of the things that we've done, and we've done responsibly, is really made sure that Grenada's personality keeps coming to the fore. People are coming here to be in Grenada. It's not that they're coming then to mirror what they're experiencing in their own countries. That would be selling ourselves short. So when we get them in to see that underbelly of Grenada, and get closer with the communities and understand all the things like JAB, it gives us that emotional loyalty and sparks the curiosity, and really is the differentiator for Grenada.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned that. And of course, historically, there has been this sort of stereotype of viewing a tourist as somebody who is white from North America or from Europe, right? With the Hawaii shirt and the straw hat, and right, with the sandals who come. That's just the stereotype in my mind. But what we have seen, or what we continue to see really, is that sort of Afro-diasporic tourism, where we find lots of people, African Americans, for example, are doing a lot of more traveling to places like Grenada to explore that kind of heritage tourism that you reference here. Can you talk about the uptick in Afro-diasporic tourism into the Caribbean? Are we looking at those trends? Is that something we have been looking at as a specific demographic indicator?
We've given ourselves the title as the ancestral home for Black creatives, where they come, they feel seen, they feel appreciated, they feel celebrated. And especially in a time where a lot of them are struggling with what's happening in the USA, they are looking for places where they will have that celebration, where they don't have to worry, And I also note that, we've got some really, people who are in the international stage, like the Yvette Noel Shaw, like Aisha Hines, etc., who again are very well known and respected within that space. So it has been that sort of evolution has continued. We did the Spice Mass press strips. We started in 2020 to really reaching out to very well-respected journalists. And I can remember one of the, and we wanted to make a difference. It wasn't just about coming and playing and putting on a feathered costume, etc. We worked with Angus Martin, we worked with Ian Charles from Jambalassi, Jab King, etc., to let them get behind the obvious, you know, and we gave them the history of Jab. We helped them to understand, you know, the evolution of the art form. And I can remember when I read the articles, like they made me cry because, you know, we had one which won an award with C.E.O, which was how Spice Mass made me recognize and lean into my Blackness. So all those stories have resonated with their readership. You know, they understand that coming and having this cathartic experience is good for the soul, that there is a deeper meaning. And I feel that as the tourist office, we have always tried to make sure that things are not superficial, that there's a legacy element to it, that there is an educational element, that there is a sharing element to it, because that's how you impact people in a really meaningful way. And, you know, there are lots of places around the world that are just doing the Sunsan Sea. And unfortunately, you know, they can sell their holidays at much cheaper prices to Grenada. So at the end of the day, we have to make sure that what that offering has to be transformational, and it has to be something where people say, wow, I couldn't do that anywhere else. So, you know, it's been a fascinating opportunity to sit and see the increase in the understanding of what Grenada has to offer. I think a lot of people know Grenada as that, you know, we've won Best Beach at Paradise Beach in USA Today. We've won Best Beach with Grand Dance as well. But when you read stories which are deep and they're touching on people's emotions, it has a lingering legacy that really is very, very impactful. So when you see the positive tourism growth, that really hasn't been by chance, you know. It's really because we put the people at the front of our conversation and really, as I said before, redefine that tourism narrative and really leaned into all those things that are intrinsically Grenadian, but that maybe were shied away from before.
Right. Now, and of course, as I said, you came into tourism in Grenada just at the tail end. I mean, you know, the lingering effects of COVID was still around. So it was a bit touch and go there for a moment. What were you thinking in that moment? Were you saying, my goodness, why did I take this opportunity now? Given what was on your mind? Because as I said in the intro, you know, Caribbean tourism was essential. People were just not traveling because a big part of it were these COVID restrictions, right? So you go and then you had to get quarantined, and there was all of the uncertainty that even before you had to go back to your country of origin, that if you tested positive, you couldn't board the flight, you know, and then you also had hotels that were expected to have these COVID rules in place for visitors, right? And so it was just so much to travel back then that I'm wondering to myself, what was your thinking? What was your thought process in trying to manage that period, but also in trying to get the destination back to its original tourism footing?
Dr. Bubb, you can remember how difficult it was for you. So
That's right.
By 1,000 and then, you know, lay that at the Minister of Tourism and all the stakeholders. And it was so difficult. I remember we got into so many deep conversations where people weren't aligned with what we were thinking. And really, the art of communication is a gift. And I feel that being able to bring all stakeholders to the table and leaning into the data, leaning into you know, empirical data from around the world was really, really important. So, you know, that whole period, I sort of have put to the back of my head, and I don't want to bring it to the front very often, but it really was uncharted waters. And, you know, the lack of information and just the fact that we were learning in real time, you know. You remember simple things like the airlines were not flying. Well, if airlines are not flying, how do you have a tourism business? And I remember sitting down and talking with Virgin about opening back up, talking to JetBlue and American. And again, remember, businesses were dying because you didn't have the amount of loads on your flights. So therefore, do you fly, you know, with 20 people on it versus 200 people? And we really had to rebuild trust and that connectivity from a demand that was almost zero. So we focused on the strategic airlift negotiations. We looked at high opportunity markets. And again, we were very, very intentional about positioning Grenada as that place where you could start your healing, as that place where, again, it was not contrived, it was, you know, authentic sense of community, you know, sense of the Grenadian diaspora was phenomenal. We saw, again, how they had really, you know, put up their hands and supported with the donations and stuff like that. So we actually created a program that was called 473 Connect, and that was for the diaspora. And it was a training program where we, you know, treated them like travel advisors and taught them about all the aspects of Grenada's tourism, and then incentivize them to actually recommend it to their friends and family. And we also started a volunteerism program because, remember, again, people were feeling like emotionally raped and they wanted to give back. So that volunteerism program was actually bringing together all the things that they could do from a philanthropic perspective on island when they came to Grenada. And these things also gave us a lot of noise in the media, because people were like, yeah, we really like these programs. And, you know, having a seat at the table, you know, was important in terms of really owning that whole conversation around sustainability and, you know, renewal and recalibration. And, you know, it was all about communicating with our key industry players, tour operators, travel agents. They're the ones that own the relationship with the customer. So that helped to really make the destination stronger. And we were resolute in terms of saying, okay, we are coming out of COVID now. You know, we saw, and I think COVID, the one of the things that it did was it showed the linkages between agriculture and fisheries, etc. Because as you remember, the farmers were struggling because they didn't have a market. The fishermen, they didn't have anybody to buy the fish. And then all of a sudden people were like, oops, really, there is a far stronger linkage between tourism and agriculture and fisheries than we thought before. So in 2023, we were actually one of only 5 or 6 countries in the Caribbean who beat their pre-COVID numbers. So, you know, we actually had a growth that year of 12%.
Now, let us talk about Airlift. Now, I reside in the Washington area, so our gripe is that we do not have the luxury of a direct JetBlue service like our counterparts in New York and now even Boston. But that aside, the fact is that Airlift has been one of the features of your tenure as CEO. Not only, of course, inbound North American and European airlift. So, for example, we have now you can have intra-regional travel with BA and Virgin coming out of Barbados and St. Lucia. But outside of that, you do also have that additional JetBlue service and that direct seasonal now Caribbean Airlines service as well that I see that I would actually be using that service very soon, direct from Grenada to JFK. But let us talk about Airlift and where the destination is. Earlier you spoke about that Delta service as well. But let us reflect on that aspect of your tenure.
I love working. That's like my sweet spot. And as I said before, you can't have tourism, long stay visitation without having a strong and robust airlift, performance. And Boston has traditionally been a very wealthy area, high propensity to travel, etc. We've had a strong relationship with JetBlue. One of the things that we also did was had them move the aircraft or change the aircraft from the A320s to the A321s.
21s, yeah.
Yeah, so those are the 200-seaters. We also got Mint, and the Mint aircraft is honestly, I think, one of the best in the air, because Mint is that for the front end of the aircraft where you've got, 4. So you've got 14, 16 first class seats, but very, very, modern and really very, it's one of the most attractive first class suite. So we actually had that, which underpins as well the fact that we are a destination which is more boutique. We also had Air Canada. Let me just start again, because there's so much that happened with Airlift, and it has not been an easy road because, for example, when we think about coming out of COVID as well, remember that the airlines would have still been struggling with the lack of profitability, etc. So they were very resolute about the destinations that they would open up into. And we were also, as a destination, very resolute about the fact that we would not be engaging in revenue guarantees. I think there are things that are lazy. I think that they're an easy way out. So everything that we do is based on a business case. So we look at the data and we then put forward the reasons why the airline should fly to Grenada. So we had JetBlue starting the Boston service. We had British Airways and Virgin. Both of them increased their capacity, so that British Airways went from 2 flights a week to 3 flights a week, and that is year round. And Virgin also went from 2 flights a week in the winter to 3 flights a week in the summer. And we're actually continuing to build up so that that is then 3 flights a week year round. With Air Canada, we have had some inconsistency in terms of that capacity, because Air Canada has also struggled to find their perfect template in terms of productivity and profitability, and also optimization of their aircraft. They've had struggles with getting their delivery of new aircraft, struggles with their pilots, etc. So they came to us last year and said, okay, well, we can only do 4 flights a week or none. And we were moving from 2 flights a week. So we said, oh, that's a big ask, but, we are not afraid of a challenge. So we actually said we prefer to have the 4 flights a week rather than the 0 flights a week, because we were getting that additional capacity. And remember that we have to marry airlift capacity with the number of hotel beds that we have on island, we then took the decision that we were no longer going to continue with Condor out of Germany. And the reason for Condor was that there had never been any real takeoff in that business. I think if you looked at what Condor was delivering 10 years ago to what it was delivering last year, it would probably have been very comparable. And when you look at driving a business case, you have to ensure that you see growth and that it then can stand on its own 2 feet. And we weren't getting that traction. It was the same thing. We got one flight a week in the winter, and that's tagged with either Barbados or Tobago. And we had to give a contribution to Condor, and they wanted to move that from 220,000 euros to 500,000 euros. And we were like, okay, well, let's do the maths. If you work that out, you're probably paying about 200 odd euros per passenger. Doesn't work. Everything has opportunity cost. So where else can we put that money to ensure that we have a good return, which is what we did. So we thought, okay, we've got these 4 flights a week with Air Canada, so let's go with that. Fast forward the next year, and Air Canada says, well, actually, we still haven't got these aircraft that were going to be delivered, so we're going to go back to 2. So at that stage, that's where we thought, okay, well, look, let's look and see how do we make up for the loss in the seats from the Canadian market. And we thought the regional lift hadn't come back as yet. So we really strengthened that relationship with Inter-Caribbean. And we also worked with 2 new buoys that were coming back on stream, which was the Liat 2020, as well as Sunrise. So regional airlift is a very difficult thing. You've got a very small market. You've got, in terms of the cost to operate, it's very expensive, not only from the perspective of the landing fees and the fees that you pay to the handling agent, but the taxation, etc. So it is still a work in progress, but I feel that the governments within the Caribbean have talked about this for so long that it is now time that they really take proactive action and look at taking the doing something specifically for the Caribbean where we reduce the taxation within that space and really help to actualize this whole thing about regional integration.
Yes, Ms. Roach, I want you to stick a pin there, because I was always under the impression that if you have more competitors in the market, in the context of regional air travel, that is going to drive the cost down. Because what do we see now? We have Sunrise, we have the re-emergence of Liat, we have Caribbean Airlines, yes. We also have, again, as I said before, the British Airways and the Virgin Atlantic, that gives opportunities for intra-regional travel as well, because they're offering those seats. Of course, you have your SVG Air and things like that. So even with all of those competitors, because it's no longer a Liat Caribbean Airlines only, it's not that dichotomy. You have your Sunrise now, you have your Inter-Caribbean as well, right? So how is it that with all of these players, we still have these increased the prices that have not really budged?
It's because the cost structure is such that they can't budge, and it needs to have a sort of macro evaluation, because just like American and British Airways will have their one world, we need to be able to have these airlines come together and not compete on the same routes, but look at code sharing and also look at how they can purchase together so that they drive down the cost. When you say we had the fifth freedom rights and we opened up British Airways flying from St. Lucia into Grenada, and also Virgin flying from Barbados into Grenada, that also gives us more seat, but it puts a lot of pressure on the smaller buoys as well. So traditionally, the Caribbean has supported the external markets and the external airlines, but not done anything to support the intra-regional players. And I think that now more than ever, where we see that we have the opportunity to build out the Caribbean as a proper market, not just as an afterthought. We have to give them support. We have to invest in their marketing programs. We have to give them a place at the table to discuss with us what our overarching vision is and the execution of that vision. And certainly we've developed a strong strategic partnership with InterCaribbean. I think that irrespective of the challenges that they may have, you've got a very bold local Caribbean man who has invested because he believes in the region. He could go elsewhere. He believes in this region. And of course, everywhere has teething problems. So I feel that we need to give support to our own to ensure that we continue to strengthen. Caribbean market is a really important one, and not just obviously as the leisure component, but certainly in terms of developing trade and also helping us to strengthen and deepen those cultural linkages. So I am fully committed to it. And I really hope that we can have actionable items which will help to improve the profitability and ensure the viability of those airlines. There's a lot of capacity on the route. So as I said, they need to sit together and they need to come up with, a sensible commercial plan where everybody has a role to play, but they're not eating each other's food.
Well, and also not charging us the same price of a ticket from Grenada to Jamaica than what it would cost you to go from Grenada to JFK, or even cheaper to go from Grenada to JFK.
Well, Dr. Bubb, that will be,
as you said, a more macro.
It will be a work in progress.
Yeah.
But again, then it's about doing things like tax-free aviation fuel, about reducing the internal taxes. It should be that we're a zone, and once you're in the zone, you're then exempted from the additional taxes. Again, we've got to look at it from a Caribbean perspective rather than a siloed perspective of each island on its own.
Island on its own there, absolutely. Yes, so let's get to some viewer comments. We have a comment here from Margaret Francis, who is asking, how much is the government subsidy for these airlines coming to Grenada? And what is the return on that investment so far?
Yeah, so that's what I was saying, is that we moved away from giving any subsidies. What we do is we do cooperative marketing, and that cooperative marketing is really to elevate Grenada's visibility within the respective markets and ultimately really refine the visitor that's coming to Grenada so that we can get tourism playing its part in revolutionizing the economic production.
Chris Davies, good morning, Chris. You're saying, thank you for everything, Petra. You've done us proud. Wilbur again is saying, love the removal of the revenue guarantee and reallocation of resources into marketing. So we have that there. Let's get to another comment from Margaret. Margaret is saying, one of the major problems driving air ticket prices in the region is government taxes. It's the elephant in the room. What are her thoughts on that? I suspect you might say to me, Petra, that's above your pay grade. That's above your pay grade.
We agree with you, totally.
Yep. Michelle Duncan is saying, awesome job, Petra. You did an exceptional job. So as we end the segment here, Petra, let us talk big picture, the future of Grenada as a tourist destination, notwithstanding those sustainability challenges, the biggest, of course, being climate change with the hurricane season and what that does. Of course, we saw what happened in the context of Carriacou and PT Martinique and what that did for tourism there. Notwithstanding that, of course, the destination, Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique, still remains resilient. But, that is another elephant in the room that I think not only Grenada, but as a region, that is something we have to contend with as well. So as you look at the destination, notwithstanding one of those threats that I reference here, big picture, the future of Grenada as a tourism destination.
I think that Grenada is honestly the sort of place that gets into your soul and helps to settle you. It helps to you to recalibrate. It helps you to find good energy. So I know that ultimately that magic of Grenada, which is in its people and its own thought, in its authenticity and in its courage to be different, that will always be the greatest strength. And, you know, at the end of the day, working for a tourism authority and working for Grenada Tourism Authority, that carries a lot of responsibility. So it's not just about driving visitation or just managing the reputation of the destination, but it's using tourism as a catalyst for transformation. And what I always say is that there's a fine line between what good tourism looks like and tourism that erodes what makes a place special. So when tourism stops benefiting the people and starts changing the country more than the country shapes that experience, then we know that we're going down the wrong place. So we've worked really hard to preserve Grenada's cultural identity as being the heartbeat of that visitor experience and ensure that our people remain central to the narrative, to the storytelling. So I really see that as continuing in the future. And I'm really excited for, you know, the next chapter for the island.
And the next chapter for the island, but what will be the next chapter for you? Where do you go from here?
I'm going into the private sector with Wyndham Grand Barbados because, again, I love a challenge. I love doing something that's different. And you know, I've done the public sector all my life, and I want to go and see what private sector feels like. And again, Wyndham Grand Barbados is a 422-room hotel, and it's got a lot of opportunity. And I'm very excited about going and seeing what that opportunity looks like when we map it out.
But of course, Petra, before you go, I do like to ask some of my guests very personal questions as sort of icebreaker questions, because, you know, we know the personalities, we know what they do, but this is, I believe, your first time appearing on the Bubb Report, incidentally. Which,
I've always run.
You've always ran away.
No, but the thing is, like, the challenge is, like, when you're busy, it's very difficult to carve out time. And
yes.
But I hope that you will say that any time you asked me for anything, data, contacts, etc., it was sent immediately, because
it was, yes.
You know, that's how we support. It's not just about our voice, but it's about empowering the others around us with information so that they too can be the spokespersons.
So let's get to some of those closing icebreaker questions at the tail end. What is the last thing you completed on your bucket list?
Ooh, I jumped out of a plane and skydived in New Zealand.
Welcome to the skydiving club.
Did you do how high were you? I was 15,000.
15,000 as well. I did 2 jumps. I did one in Long Island and one in DC. Well, Baltimore, right outside of Baltimore.
Back up again after the first one. That was like, I've done it. End of story.
Check. Bucket list item, check. Okay. What Netflix show did you binge watch embarrassingly fast?
I binge watch every Netflix show because I don't have, like, it's occasionally when I got time to just stay in bed, then I do, but I don't even remember what I've watched. I just watched one, but I can't remember what it was, but I loved When They See Us.
Right. Would you rather be the funniest or the smartest person in the room?
Smartest.
Smartest. Okay. That no brainer there. No brainer there. Let's get to the other one here. I think I know the answer to that one. Would you rather be slightly late or super early? I think super early, right?
You know
of
me.
Course. Yes. Now let's get to two more, actually three more. What is one family tradition that you would like to carry on in the future?
Oh, we always eat lunch together on a Sunday.
That's good. Very well. Very well. When you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you always want to be a boss lady?
I wanted to be an air hostess. I thought that was the most super cool, elegant, yeah, that's what I wanted. Everybody was aspiring to be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. I was like, air hostess, please. I love the fact that they wore these high heel shoes.
And who in life inspires you to be better?
I think so many people. I can't give you one person, yeah, I can't give you one answer. I see so many people who have struggles, like I've got one of my dear, small businesses at the Spice and Craft Market, and she comes into the market every day from Grenville, and, she's working to take care of her kids, and, like she's an inspiration because she does what she has to do. And then, Dame Billy Miller was the first Minister of Tourism that I worked with, and
in Barbados.
And I lived in England, and she came over to ITB to do. There was a government conference before ITB, and she stood up in a room with about 500 people, all senior government ministers, and spoke about an issue at that time, which has since been resolved. But I just felt, oh my goodness, she's standing up. She's not scared. She spoke so articulately. All these people of all different colors and all different seniorities were just looking at her and listening to every word. And I just felt, that's what I want to be.
What would be the most cherished memory or cherished location in Grenada that you would take back with you to Barbados as a parting souvenir? That's the final question.
My team at the GTA have been exceptional, and I am the mouthpiece, but they're the people who each of them owns their little space within the office and have done tremendously in terms of, nothing that I asked was too much. I'm very, I always believe that you play hard, but you work even harder. Yes. So, even though I was very demanding in terms of, expectations, they understood the role that we had to play within the bigger Grenadian community, and they rose to the occasion, and they honestly served with love for this beautiful tri-island state.
Anything else, Petra, before you go?
I just want to say that the last 4 years have been exceptional. I have really, and I'm going to get all teary, so I shouldn't. It's been absolutely amazing, and I'm going to miss it incredibly, but I just feel that I can look back with pride and know that I have wonderful relationships for the rest of my life, really.
Yes, absolutely. Petra, thank you so much for your service to Grenada. Grenada is extremely grateful for your services rendered in the tourism space, and we wish you the very best on your new endeavor.
Thank you so much.
Yes, with still work to do before you leave, but I know you're actually working now, so we're so grateful. You're working now, so we're so grateful that you were able to take the time to speak with us.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, you're most welcome. Viewers and listeners, Miss Petra Roach, who is the outgoing CEO of the Grenada Tourism Authority. Of course, Ms. Petra Roach did an exit interview with the Bubb Report. Full disclosure, we have been trying for years to have Ms. Roach on the program, but obviously her schedule did not permit her to sit with us. Anytime we reached out, it was just, the schedules just did not blend. So we're very happy that at least she was able to take time off her schedule, because of course she's attending a conference as we speak. So we're very grateful that she took this time to speak with us for this exit interview today on the Bubb Report. So we want to thank her for that and wish her all the very best. Of course, we have some viewer comments. Someone is saying, great woman. Someone is saying, great woman. Let's see. Bob Marish is saying, by all measure, Petra did a monumental job with Grenada's tourism. Best of luck, young lady. Of course, a very heartwarming conversation there. So viewers, what we want to do now is to take our first segment break and come back for the second segment of the program. Now, while we do that, we do want to know and hear from you. Where are you watching the Bubb Report from this week? Just put that in the comment section so we can acknowledge you during the live stream when we get back from the break. So let's just take a quick break and we'll be back for the second segment of the program. Stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the organization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.
Mike, there we go. Welcome back to the program. Of course, before we get to the second segment, we do want to acknowledge some of our viewers. Ronnie Slinger is joining us from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Ronnie is out there in Bed-Stuy. We also have With us, I believe that person is Marcia Gabriel, who is joining us from Montparnasse. Good morning, Ms. Gabriel from beautiful Montparnasse. Then we have Jeremiah Cox, who is saying, I'm lying flat on my back on my cell phone here in Connecticut. A great program, Bubb. All right, let's go again. We have May, who is joining us from Beltsville. That's just down the road from me there in Beltsville, Maryland. And of course, we have another Maryland in the house. We have Camille Mitchell, who is joining us from Silver Spring. Of course, I'm also in the Maryland area. Further afield, we have somebody, Joachim Lewis, who is joining us from Chesterfield, England. Where is Chesterfield, Joachim? Which part of England? Is that in the Greater London area? It would be nice to know where that is. I'm not too familiar with that, with England generally. Kadisha Williams, of course, is joining us from Grenada. Then we have Lawrence, who's joining us from Astoria, Lawrence Nyack. Roses Lewis from New York. Then we have Heidi Christopher, who's joining us from Queens. Lydia Louison is joining us from Montreal, Canada. Let's see who else we have here. We have Grenada Sunshine, who's joining us from Brooklyn, New York, as well as Mr. Harold Douglas, who is also joining us from Brooklyn. So somebody's saying that they're on a plane. Michelle, you're on a plane. I hope at least you're going to Grenada to get some sun, sea, sand, and oil down, and maybe some jab. Of course, you know what the Prime Minister said, stay away from jab until it's closer to Carnival. So, so folks, what we want to do now is to get right into the second and very important segment. And for those of you who are in the Grenadian diaspora, wherever you are in North America, especially the United States, this is a very, very important conversation. So here goes. We are joined by a panel of experts to gauge the impact of the Trump remittance tax. Now, in the regime's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, which is in essence a major tax breaks to America's billionaire class, it could make the United States the most expensive of the group of 7 countries from which to send money. Of course, we know that many of our relatives back in Grenada and the Caribbean rely on remittances. And as a percentage of GDP, remittances are in fact significant. Now, as part of the bill, the United States government will take a cut of all remittances sent to foreign nations, a move that will hit millions of families worldwide who rely on money sent from loved ones working in the United States. Now, this economic measure intends to impose a 3.5% tax on remittance transfers sent by anyone who is not an American citizen. Initially, the proposal was for a 5% tax, but that was revised downwards to 3.5%, which is still significant. Now, an estimated 40 million people in the United States are green card holders and are in some type of working visa, and that will directly apply to those groups. Now, people sending money from the United States already pay income tax on their earnings, so they would, in essence, be taxed twice, critics say. Now, under this new legislation, immigrants would pay an additional 3.5% federal tax on top of the roughly 6% they pay banks and remittance companies. Now, that would amount to nearly $10 of every 100. But that is not all. A tax on remittances valued at $905 billion globally will not only hit U.S. households and low-income countries, where they can account for more than 30% of GDP in some cases, it could also undermine key American national security and foreign policy priorities. Now, if the Senate passes this Republican bill, remittance senders and recipients who already contend with high fees will undoubtedly be hit the hardest. Now, in 2024, the global average cost of sending $200 across borders was 6.4%. Now, that's more than double the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal of 3% and exceeds the Group of 20 target of 5% overall. Now, of course, remittance volumes, if remittance volumes were to fall, that is, U.S. remittance providers, that is the companies that enable the sending and receiving of these payments would also be adversely affected. Now, the proposed legislation imposes new responsibilities for these remittance services companies, such as MoneyGram and Western Union. And these new measures would include things like verifying the sender's citizenship and enforcing new fee structures and reporting mechanisms. Now, here to make sense of all of this is no stranger to the Bubb Report economist, Dr. Patrick Antoine. And we are also joined by Mr. Richie Richardson, who is, I believe he's a designer, but he's also an entrepreneur. And of course, I will give him an opportunity to introduce himself shortly. But of course, we were also supposed to be joined by another guest here who is a wealth management expert. Unfortunately, that gentleman, that's Mr. Philip Ben, is unable to make it. So, gentlemen, welcome to the Bubb Report this week.
Thank you.
Yes, and Mr. Richardson, I want to begin with you because this is your first time on the program. So, for the benefit of our viewers, I know you're an entrepreneur in the fashion space. Could you tell us who you are and what you do in the diaspora?
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir.
I've been listening to your previous conversation with Petra, and it was really, truly enlightening.
Yes, sir.
I started in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm a fashion designer. I come from a family of creatives. And my brand in the United States is Richie Richardson Fab. That's our fashion brand. And I'm also the producer of Fab Fashion Week in New England.
So you're in the New England area, Boston, Rhode Island, or
Western Massachusetts.
Massachusetts.
We're based between New York and New England. The fashion entity is based in New England because we saw an opportunity to bring fashion to a region that is less diverse. We saw an opportunity to sort of like move into that space and introduce those people to the wealth and opportunity of the diversity of fashion, particularly that comes from the Caribbean. So it was very intentional for us to be here.
Absolutely. And of course, entrepreneurs always talk money. And of course, that's part of what you do. Of course, you are a creative as well. But of course, creatives cannot, thrive without that financial aspect. So this is a very important conversation. And I'm glad that Mr. Jerry Hopkins was able to refer you to be a part of the program today. And Dr. Antoine, welcome back. I hope that you had a very soul and spirit-filled church service this morning, sir. Just unmute your mic, sir.
Got you. I found the unmute button. Good morning. It's a pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Pleasure to be with you as usual. And yes, it is always inspirational. Church on Sunday morning. I've found my way back. My parents' friends are happy to know I found my way back.
So you are what you call a recovering Catholic? Are you Catholic? I'm just assuming. I don't know.
I would simply say that I'm a born-again Christian. I go to any one of the churches that I'm close to, but no matter where I go on Sunday morning, it always gives me cause for reflective transformation. Not to be conformed to the world, but reflective transformation. I see Richie smiling. He obviously knows what I'm speaking about.
So,
yes,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, Richie. Go ahead.
Dr. Patrick, so coming from the Caribbean, part of my schooling was religious instruction. So even though I am not necessarily religious, I have a deep appreciation and a very clear understanding of the religious values and virtues. So everything that you say, I could completely relate to. And I have a few friends who have sort of moved back into spirituality on different levels. And you sound as though you have found your way back there as well.
Yeah, man, I tell you without upstaging the subject of the program this morning, you don't go through what some of us went through in the last 3 years and remain non-transformed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, gentlemen, this is a very important conversation. And Richie, I want to begin with you. Now, of course, as part of this, I call it the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, because, of course, given who is the author of this, we know that, he's an alleged marketing genius. But I think, but let us talk about this remittance tax here. For a lot of us in the diaspora, a lot of us are working people, right? And so we have to make very important financial decisions when it comes to, do I pay my rent today, or do I send $50 for Auntie Udine, who might, need that help with a medical emergency back home? So let us big picture talk about how that would fit within the current challenges that a lot of us face in the diaspora financially, because of course, here in North America, if you don't pay your rent, you're rendered homeless. And so money comes at a premium. It comes in one hand and it goes out the next. So let's talk about this new remittance tax that will be imposed on top of what we already pay into the system here.
So I want to bring it down to, I want to make it personal because of some of the people I work with. So as someone who produces fashion here in the United States, the people that sew my work, the people who work for me, the seamstresses and the tailors, all of these people are from the Caribbean. Some are from Trinidad, some are from Jamaica, some are from different regions in the Caribbean. But in each case, all of these people have families here and in their home countries. And each of these individuals, each of these groups of people that I work with on a monthly basis, regularly, on a monthly basis, send money back home. Not only because they need to support a family member, but some of these people are actually supporting a sort of microfinance, financing kind of industry back home, where their families are actually running a small business. Some of these people are actually sending the money back home to build their houses. So at every level and I'm making this very personal because this is, from this angle, is where I get the experience. A lot of times we hear about the impact of something on people, but a lot of times we don't know the people who are actually living the experience. And already I am hearing from the people that I work with how much that is going to impact them, how it is going to affect their livelihood here, and how it is going to affect their family's livelihood in the different regions of the Caribbean. So from that standpoint, I can tell you already the ripples already negative.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Let me bring in Dr. Antoine. Dr. Antoine, of course, in the context of the region, and if we look at any estimates of revenue and expenditure in any Caribbean island, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, you name it, those statements always reference that remittance variable. Yeah. And that remittance variable, sometimes, it's over 3%, sometimes it's over 5%, depending on the country. Now, let us talk about big picture here, macroeconomically, this new variable that will be introduced into the pot. How would that affect that remittance variable, big picture?
Well, I think from the big picture perspective is clearly negative to the extent that, very simply put, if we were to look at the numbers for 2023, which is, of course, a good reflection of what a normal year would look like, the net inflows from remittances in Grenada, looking at the money services transfers as a sort of the institution that we're pulling the data from, we're talking about nearly $60 million in inflows. So the exact figure was about $57.3 million into the economy in net inflows, which of course is substantial, because I'm happy you brought in, this morning, someone who can tell us about the sort of microeconomic implications. But let's go to the second variable. For Grenada, it's about 6.75% of our sort of what we call the GNI, gross national income. So again, fairly substantial because, as the world economy does better, there you go, remittance inflows will also do better. And therefore, as the world economy does worse, remittance inflows will fall. So I think the second thing we want to recognize is, although we had 2024 being sort of a year which was unusual, we had more inflows because of the hurricane in 2024, than usual. That would have taken away some inflows ordinarily from those families that would have front-loaded the inflows because of the hurricane. That would have led to a diminution of the sort of forecast of what they could send in 2025.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. All right, go ahead now. Go ahead. Yes.
In 2025, we had the added pressure of an uncertain and certainly a U.S. economy that is stagnated to be very sort of conservative in our outlook to the end of the year. But if we're to look at where the economy is now, an economy where there's a lot of consumer concerns about the economy, and so you would expect that inflows would fall. So two influences: front loading coming into 2025. We expected a downturn in remittance inflows, but that's been compounded by where the economy is now. The third factor then is that you then put the remittance tax on top of that, on top of an economy where people are concerned about the future, so that they're going to be essentially trying to withhold some of the transfers that they normally send to families in the Caribbean, in Latin America and the Caribbean, in Grenada. And then you have the remittance tax of 3.5%, but that's not the end. There is something called, and it's we talk to our people in ways that I think they understand in Grenada, sort of an elasticity, which is very simply saying, when there is a tax, right, it has an impact on your ability to send funds home. So if there's a tax of 3.5%, the impact is not 3.5%, it's actually a little larger. And in this instance, based on all the estimates that we have been looking at, that tax is will lead to an impact of about 5.6 to 6%. So although we're seeing the remittance tax at 3.5%, the real impact on the ability for persons to send funds home is going to be larger. And we're looking at about 5.6 to 6%. So in our discussions, we shouldn't be only talking about, well, it's going to be a 3.5% tax. The impact of that is going to be between 5.6 and 6%, which means it's larger. And so we need to be concerned about that, because we now have a real tax of about 6% on a smaller base in terms of the remittance inflows that we would expect into Latin America and the Caribbean, and certainly in Grenada. And that's something we ought to be concerned about, because the impacts are not going to be as trivial as some persons believe it would be at the macroeconomic level. But we can talk about that. But the message, I think, based on the question you've asked, is that the 3.5 announcement will lead to about a 5.6 to 6% impact on a shrinking base of remittances. If we were to look at 2023 as the base, a shrinking base of remittance inflows into Grenada.
Yes, absolutely. I do want to bring in Mr. Richardson again. Mr. Richardson, if you can just unmute your mic there for us, because we were getting some background feedback from you. Are you able to? There you go. It looks like you in your workspace is busy today, Mr. Richardson. Yes, no, Mr. Richardson. Yes, go ahead.
No, I'm actually close today. It's just to have this space so that I can be present.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Richardson, let us talk about, as you said, the people that you work with, those working folks, who send monies back home and things like that. let us talk about that additional financial burden on top of those other tax measures that Mr. Trump is proposing, because in this quote big beautiful bill, again, it's really a tax cut for the 1% billionaire class in the United States. So essentially what this remittance tax is doing is paying for that tax cut in many respects. So not only are we going to be paying for to transmit funds back to home country, we're also paying for billionaires to get tax relief.
And it's part of the trickle up philosophy of this entire administration's policy. And one of the things that my people are concerned with is that, and I'm sure this is something in the diaspora that many people are concerned with, but I deal with this on a real everyday basis with the people I work with. So apart from what it will cost them, apart from the liabilities that they are now going to be facing in terms of extra cost and extra payment and extra taxation, one of the things that they're really concerned with is the fact that they now are going to be, they have to give their personal information. So it also deals with another element. It's not just about the taxation anymore now. It is about their own sense of security as to self-discovery, who they are in terms of the immigration process. A lot of people within my industry, in the fashion industry, in some stages of documentation or undocumentation. And the reason why these people can find work is because they come here very skilled, high-level skilled workers, literally professionals in their own right. And our industry are able to absorb them and work with them. And the way we pay them as contractors. So they are, they're small micro entities within themselves. So we think about this new imposition of taxation not only as a cost in terms of the monetary element of it, but what it would also cost those people in terms of their own sense of security. So that is now part of the big crux of this conversation and what we are dealing with right now, because on the daily news, on every daily newscast, you're seeing the ICE raids. You're seeing where they're showing up at people's workspaces. And that sense of insecurity is having a huge impact also on the workforce. Some of these people are not coming to work anymore. Some of these people are literally staying home. So it is actually affecting the economy as well. It is affecting the creative economy, and it is affecting that very same tax base that they're looking to tax. It is affecting that same tax base as well. So I bring that perspective because that is a perspective that most people don't have an experience in.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to share that as well.
And I want you to pick up on the bit there about folks who are, again, living in fear, if we think about it, right?
Yeah.
There are folks who, as you said, who are not going out to work. I'm sure you've experienced that in your field as well.
Yes, it is real. And so if you understand the fashion industry, and it's not just in the United States, but throughout the world, it is an industry that is populated by a lot of migrant workers. It's an industry that is populated, women's-led, populated by a lot of women as well. But particularly in the United States, it is not what it used to be in the 1950s and 60s. It is a sort of a transcontinental global village of people that come here, well-skilled from their home countries, and they will find work within this industry because all this industry is really concerned about is your level of skill and expertise and experience and how you can bring that to bear. And so for those of us, I'm not a manufacturer, I'm a fashion designer, which means I operate in the space of what is called high-level work, which means slow fashion. And so we want the best to work with us. A lot of those people and take care of their families. right here, pay their rent, don't cost the system anything because they don't get anything from the system. They contribute, they pay taxes as well as anybody, like everybody else, but they get nothing in return. They can't even get their tax remittances because they don't have a social security number to declare. That's one group of people. But there's the other group of people who are in the stages already of processing their immigration status.
Trying to get regularized.
And I can tell you what has happened already. Right next to me, my neighbor, who is they had a huge business. They were from Colombia, and their business was alterations and tailoring. One of them was a citizen. His wife, the husband was a citizen. The wife was a permanent resident, and they were bringing up a family member to join their business here. And she was already in the process. And that was one of the people I was going to employ directly to work with me. The same week that Trump was inaugurated, that application was canceled. Now, there are other people that I work with who are experiencing the same thing. Because they're in the process, everything has been, they're afraid, they're now afraid, even though it's not like the administration said it's been canceled, but they're so afraid of what they're learning and seeing that they're even afraid to go forward to the next step, because they're realizing that when you show up for your interview, you are being arrested as though you are a criminal. So the punitive element of the tax bill combined with the state that people are living in, the state of insecurity and fear regarding their immigration status, is having the double impact. So we have never had this kind of impact before. This is tariff double time, because it is also relating to people's sense of vulnerability as it relates to the immigration status. And that is very, very frightening. And I'm sure the doctor can actually give some insights on that as well.
Now, Dr. Antoine, the reason why I'm sharing the screen here is because, of course, the Atlantic Council, which of course is not necessarily a left-leaning think tank, they said, quote, countries that have enacted punitive measures on cross-border payments and currency exchanges have often undermined their own ability to combat financial crime, thereby weakening their economies and diminishing their foreign influence. Additionally, now this is what I found interesting in this article, payments industry trade groups representing companies like Western Union and Visa have written to Congress members saying the measure would hit migrants sending money back to their relatives, on top of posing a greater money laundering risk. The letter said, quote, this provision would create a dangerous new precedent with respect to government overreach by invading the privacy of Americans, harming American businesses, and for the first time, intruding on payment transactions between private individuals. So, Dr. Antoine, let us talk about the e-commerce implications here as articulated in this article.
Well, so a couple of things. I just want to again applaud you bringing Sir Richardson on the forum this morning, because what this has done is that it has given me cause to believe that this week we need to again take another look at what are our best estimates for countries like Grenada. I did say to colleagues who reached out to me last week that we didn't want to be preemptive in our analysis. We wanted to take the time to really fully work through, based on the numbers, what this would mean for economies such as Grenada and the rest of the Caribbean. So let me just be very clear, the rest of CARICOM. That's really my focus. And we'd come up with estimates of, that this could mean that we would see remittances fall to between $45 and $50 million. That's where we were looking. Based on what I've just heard from Mr. Richardson in terms of what this would mean for persons withdrawing themselves out of fear, the word is fear, from the workforce, I think would cause us to run another scenario. And that's really important for us, because I think in addition to all the various sort of parameters that we've looked at, we've presumed a steady state, that nothing would change where these things were concerned. And clearly, from what I've heard and from what I've read, coming into this meeting yesterday, and certainly reinforced by what I've just heard from Mr. Richardson, we're going to have to take a look at what happens if we have more persons withdrawing their services, which means that they themselves are going to be in a position, not going to be in a position to send remittances home in the way that they did, even in 2023. We've used 2023 as the basis. That's the first thing. E-commerce wise, this is going to lead to some very serious concerns for us in the region. We've now spent quite a bit putting the due diligence systems in place, but that's been based on a certain volume of traffic that our money transfer services would have put all of their checks and balances, know your client, financial intelligence apparatus, I mean the IP sort of services that they use, all of that would have been premised on a certain level, magnitude of business continuance. Where that falls, to the extent that we have a reduction in the level of remittance flows themselves, for fear, both because the economy is shrinking, the sort of economic impact, and of course the concerns about what the economy would look like in the next 6 months. That's one set of parameters. The second one is, of course, based on the fact that your personal information in terms of your status as a non-US citizen could put you in harm's way by the authorities is a second one we need to take a look at. What that would mean is that the remittance companies themselves may have to start looking at increasing the cost of their services. So the cost of every transfer may have to go up to cover their own cost if this continues. So we have a number of things at play. And I fear that the third factor is that we're going to see one of three things. One, persons are going to ask citizens of the US that they know to use their sort of information to transfer the funds to the Caribbean. That's certainly one thing we could see. Whether persons are going to be willing to do that in a sustained manner, we have to see, because of course it means that your information, whether you know it or not, is also going to be captured as transferring X amount of dollars to Grenada every month. And
then that can potentially raise red flags.
Absolutely.
I experienced that too. Western Union banned me from sending money because, they flagged out that was a suspicious transaction.
Absolutely.
So.
But I think the second thing is that we're going to see more risky means of transfers. And I've seen this before, where you essentially rely on, let me just say, non-formal means of transferring the monies. And there are times when it doesn't get there. Yeah. We're going to see the return of more of that. And I think thirdly, it's going to put our own citizens in the Caribbean, who themselves, because they now use the fact, think about it, that I get remittances from my grandmother or my father or my sister or my son every month. And I can use that as a basis for other financial transactions in Grenada, in St. Vincent. They may no longer have that, and that would put their own financial standing at risk. So for instance, we have the advent of the sort of micro-lending institutions, and many of them take this as the sort of collateral on which they give loans to persons in the countries based on the fact that there's this frequency of funds coming in. Sometimes they hedge against it. So you're getting your money at the end of the month, but you need a loan in the middle of the month. And many people live that way month to month, right? Having been myself involved in the microfinance industry, I can tell you, you pay a small fee, but you have the continuance. It works for the person sending the funds, and it works for you. And losing that also is going to have an impact on us. But I'm really concerned myself about this. And I think what we need to do as a region is that the money services institutions must form common cause with other sectors in the economy and reach out so that we can do a lobby as we did with the China-built vessels to the Congress and to the Senate. And I think if we're able to join forces quickly before the legislations pass and time's running out, it certainly will serve our interest in terms of having our voices heard, particularly for countries like the Eastern Caribbean, where, and I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek, where we have overperformed in terms of our adherence to these new financial norms and so on, that the US and others have really put in place.
And then you also have this whole issue of de-risking, I believe is what they call it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So how much of that would factor into all of this?
Well, to my mind, this is going to go against the thrust of de-risking financial transactions in the region. What you're doing is that you're going to be forcing people not to use the formal means of transferring funds by increasing the cost of transfers and, of course, the risk associated with transfers. So this goes against that whole move that we've spent so much resources making sure, as an Eastern Caribbean jurisdiction, we've put the infrastructure in place to bring conformity. It's going to now bring more non-conformity with that. It's the way I view it. So it's an incoherent policy. And let me just say the third thing before we sort of move on is that these funds that come to Grenada that help St. Vincent, Jamaica, they help to educate people's children. They help to buy food and goods and services, a lot of which come from the United States. Right? Medicines, etc. So what we're doing is that we're engaged, unfortunately, unintentionally. I believe the unintended consequence of these measures is that it's really forcing not a tendency towards less migration, but a tendency to where people are going to want to move, because what you're doing is that you're really now drying the inflows that have made the Caribbean strong and that have also made the Caribbean strong to make the US strong. Education, for instance, is one key example. I mean, Mr. Richardson is absolutely correct when he spoke about the quality of his workers. But many of them are educated in the region, right? And they deliver the services to people like Mr. Richardson, who is in the United States. And of course, he's serving a broad US constituency, which helps to make the US strong. You know, you think about trends and fashions, right? It's people like Mr. Richardson and others who come from different cultures that help to make the US such a diverse place for fashion and culture, almost the fashion and culture capital of the sort of North America and the Caribbean. So what we're doing is that we're weakening something that's worked well. And then you look at the benefit. What will this do, for instance, to the border measures that they want to use these resources to fund? Well, they're not going to achieve the targets. It's going to drive the supply more without building the capacity for them to do this in any substantial way. So I think it really is not a good measure. It needs to be rethought and recalibrated, because there are other ways of achieving the US's objectives, is what we keep saying. That, typically we look at, is this the least cost, best way of achieving the outcome? And increasingly, for so many other policy measures we've looked at, it is not. It is simply not. It is counterintuitive.
And viewers, we want to hear from you as well, especially those of you here in the United States. Just your thoughts on this new tax measure to pay for tax breaks for the billionaire 1% class. I mean, they already have what they have. They have a lot, really. But Mr. Richardson, I want to get back to you here on within the context of the entrepreneurial space, and how within that, we just discussed the remittance tax, but within that bill, people of certain incomes will be paying more taxes as well. So as a small businessman, is that something that you've been looking at? Because, as part of this bill, in order to fund, again, these tax breaks for billionaires,
Yeah.
People who are below a particular income threshold, when tax time comes, rest assured, you are going to be owing Uncle Sam. So, Mr. Richardson, let's talk about that aspect of it as well. And just unmute your mic, sir, while you do that.
So
yes, go ahead.
So everything the doc said, is so congruent to this continuing conversation, because one of the things that I wanted to sort of ask the doc is how much of a lobbying force or power are we as Caribbeans and those of us who have the qualifications. And when I say qualifications, I don't necessarily mean you know what I mean? I mean the qualifications in terms of our leadership roles in our specific industries. Do we have a lobby? Do we have a Caribbean voice where we can lobby? Because I think one of the things that we miss, one of the things that we lack, I should say, is a cohesive voice in the American political space. We work with partners to amend, to get certain things done. But I have not seen it yet. I work a lot with our counselors. I work a lot with our friends in CARICOM. I work a lot with the diaspora here, because my concern in fashion is not just about making clothing. It is about who we are, the impact that we have, what we bring to the economy, the resources we have, and how we impact that on the American economy as well. But how we use our influence, how we use our economic power, how we use our creative impact, and how we can bring that together as a voice, as a lobbying people. And I think one of the reasons this is becoming so troubling to us as a people. I'm going to a conference tomorrow in Boston, hosted by Authentic Caribbean Foundation. It's the Caribbean Leaders Forum, and it will be held at the State House in Boston. I think the mayor is going to be there, Boston mayor. I think the governor is supposed to be at that meeting as well. That is, and I'm going there not because I was invited, but I'm going there simply because I want to see who we are, when we show up in that space, what we bring to the table, and the solutions we can come up with as a body, as a people, because we bring so much resources, so much experiences. I want to see how we can harness that, because as you say, time is running out. This bill most likely will be passed. It doesn't matter those who are hedging and the Josh Hawleys and the Susan Collins who are always having great thoughts. They will go along. Most likely they're going to sign it. So it's just a matter of time. And it might be amended in some measure, but do they know how it impacts us as a people? Do they know how it impacts us as the people who have been making contributions to this country from its inception, from Alexander Hamilton, from the beginning to now? Do they know how it impacts us? We have been giving and contributing, but we have not been asking. And according to Martin Luther King, the check is due. The check is due, but we have to put our signatures on that check as one name, and make a demand in such a way that people must know what we bring to the region. And I'm sure, statistically speaking, you know that, Doctor, you have that information. You're in that space. You work in that environment. But I think we need to level those resources and information with the data for them to know who we are, what we bring, and what will be lost in the American economy, not in our home region states, but what will be lost with this tariff in the American space, because a lot of people are going to be retracting from the labor force. That is a huge I use my experience just to bring it in, just as a micro level, to show what I know already, but I'm hearing this ripple throughout my industry. I'm hearing this ripple throughout. Everybody is speaking about it. Most of us work with people in that fashion space, and in most cases they're in some very varying stages of that. And so when you think about that group of people who are going to be affected, the ripple effect back home, but right here, how are they going to pay their rent if they retract themselves from the economy? How are they going to live here? How are they going to survive beyond that? So the cascading effect on this bill is actually designed, it is punitive, it is hateful, it is designed to actually eradicate a group of people or make it almost impossible for a group of people. And I tell my white friends this all the time. This is not designed for my white friends. This is designed for non-white people. Those of us who come from regions, well-educated, well-informed, ready for the world, have been contributing from the time we arrived at the various stages to now. And we now have a punitive bill that is designed to eradicate and erase our contributions. It's not just about the money. It is all the contributions that we have made and the progresses we have been making. It is to erase that and remove that from the cultural space, from the landscape, and then brand us as people who have come to take. And this, I think, is the deleterious effect. Is the report that will come after this, the historical report that will be written, that we never contributed anything in the first place, so we were less important.
I was muted. Dr. Antonio, your thoughts? If you can just respond.
No, my thoughts is that I'm really moved by the clarity, one. But I think also from the very practical issues put on the program this morning by Mr. Richardson, and I'm going to respond to it this way. Increasingly, we have found, and I'm stepping away from my sort of participation as a Grenadian economist now, or regional economist in my private capacity, to my sort of CEO and the technical advisory capacity of the CARICOM Private Sector Organization, which is an associate institution of the community. And I'm going to say that increasingly we're finding that there is a new form of engagement that is required. That really is an engagement by the collective from the private sector in the Caribbean, speaking not just to the private sector collective in the US, but speaking to the US administration. Not solely through our governments, because I think that's a different tenor, it's a different cadence, but speaking directly to the constituents and to the representatives. I am using it collectively, Congress, Senate, right? With our diaspora in the United States. And I want to say that I think this is another very clear signal that we need to hurry putting that architecture in place completely. It's begun. We have started what is a CARICOM private sector organization, U.S. Business Council. Quite unfortunately, and I can say so openly, it's been really focused on some of the big ticket items, shipping, and some of the sort of corresponding banking and a number of those issues that have really impacted CARICOM U.S. trade and relationships. But on matters like this that don't necessarily impact the big businesses from the United States, but impact our people or diaspora at a sort of more micro and meso, the institutional level. We didn't have an institutional sort of mechanism to direct, to channel, and to properly represent those interests where it matters most in the US. And coming from this program today, I can tell you that I'm going to bring this up with my executive committee on Tuesday. We meet monthly. That I think increasingly we need to, certainly on this one, see what we can do. So I'm promising that I'll bring it up to see what we can do. On the last occasion, Prime Minister Motley, as the head of CARICOM, was instrumental in getting the private sector voices heard in her communication to the President of the United States. That's how effective we were. We need to do that. But I'm going to bring it up with them to see how we can now engage all the resources that we have in trying to see how we can get this matter properly represented where it matters most in the short period that remains before the Senate does in fact give its assent or otherwise to this. So I want to say that coming out of this, that's a commitment I'm making to you, that on Tuesday we will bring this up with the CPSO Executive Committee, and Grenada does have a representative on the executive. So we will certainly do that. But I think we must make sure that we never caught in this position again. If there's one important thing I want to leave with the program, is that these matters, I think, Kellon, you know it, they're not going to stop. There is a certain, orientation, the America First policy, making America great again. And let me say that I'm not knocking the U.S. administration on this one, 100%. We have found that in my engagement, where I had the opportunity to lead on behalf of the private sector on the U.S. measures on China-built vessels, that they just hadn't thought through, Kellon. They just hadn't thought through what this would mean for this unique group of countries and people that are to our third border, that has helped to make our culture strong, that are not takers. How are we not takers? Man, the data says that you have a trade surplus with us, and we're not measuring everything. It says that a lot of our people are there, and they contribute so much at so many different levels. I'm not getting on the soapbox this morning. I'm saying that unlike other countries with which you have, a deficit, you have a surplus with us. Unlike other countries where you have a massive problem, with drugs and trafficking, little Grenada and other people, you've come to admit, right, that really these are not the worst offenders. They're not really the big problem spots for us. Yes, you have a couple individuals, but Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Dominica, Antigua, St. Kitts and Nevis, these are not your problems. These are countries that are net contributors to what the U.S. has come to represent. And we have to find a way, and I'm going to make this point clearly, of pulling ourselves out of those representing us as Latin America and the Caribbean when it's useful. So we pulled in with Colombia and pulled in with El Salvador, and we need to learn to speak as Caribbean people. And we must make sure that going forward, we meet with the diaspora group so that we now can start really building this mechanism. And Kellon, you're going to be important here. It's not just rhetoric this morning. It's saying that unless we are able to put our institutional mechanism in place, because it's not there, so that we can start speaking directly, we're going to continue having these problems where we're not thought about, we're not front of mind. We happen to be, collateral damage where these measures are concerned. And I think in a lot of instances, that's what's happening here. We are becoming collateral damage for Mexico, for El Salvador, because I have engaged. I can't say everything on the forum, but they're the ones that people are really aiming at. And when you talk about what are the sort of revenue yields I expect to get from that, they mention Mexico and mention Guatemala and mention El Salvador and mention many other places. But I said, well, what about these small islands? We are rounding error. We are a rounding error. And I dare say that we're countries that are not often thought about as being real people in that rounding error. Real people with real lives, with real contributions in real countries that make a positive impact on the U.S. economy. We're not just takers.
Dr. Antoine, what you've articulated here is so critical, but I also think it's important to acknowledge that we do have Caribbean elected representatives, or people of Caribbean descent in Congress. You have several of those. You have Congresswoman Clark from Brooklyn. And sometimes I have to ask myself, no offense to people who support these people, I am apolitical when it comes to the politicians. But when it comes to these people and these, do they have town halls in the Caribbean communities? Do they collaborate with organizations, multilateral organizations in the region, such as the Caribbean Private Sector Organization, so that we can jointly lobby on those issues when they emerge? And that's the question. I think that's where the more collaboration is needed, critically so. Mr. Richardson.
So, Dr. Antoine, you were so excellent in that last statement, but I also want to sort of like tiptoe on the statement you just made, Dr. Budd, about our representatives in Congress. One of the things that I have found that we have experienced, those of us who are in leadership roles, creatively thought leaders, one of the things that we have found is that it's not just our Caribbean representatives in Congress that we all boast about and talk about. We ourselves, we don't engage. It is us. I am bringing this to us now. It is our responsibility. That is what Dr. Antoine is talking about. It is our responsibility to come together. I want to be part of that organization you're talking about, Dr. Antoine. I will share my information with Kellen after so that I can be part of that bigger, because we have what we bring, what we are doing is part of this collective, but you don't know our story yet. And it runs the gamut from the economic standpoint to the cultural standpoint. It runs the gamut. But we are constantly seeking those alliances and those partnerships to speak as a voice. When we have that voice, we can bring those members of Congress together and then have that conversation with them. They show up at town halls and it's a rah-rah. It's a rah and it's a clap and it's all good feelings. But there's not a group of people. What I love about my Jewish friends is that they have a lobby. They have a lobby. They speak as a voice in the interest of Israel. My Palestinian friends have that. My Black American friends have that. They have the Black Caucus. We need to have a lobby that speaks. And to your point, it's one Caribbean. Doesn't matter if you're Latin American. It doesn't matter if you're Eastern or Western Caribbean. I don't speak of my Caribbean as smaller or lesser islands. I speak of us as a people. I am Caribbean first. I'm Trinidadian second. I am from a region that made me, that birthed me, that is diasporic, that is diverse. I am from that. And when I represent myself here, when I represent fashion in the United States, I represent a region. I bring that to this marketplace because one of the things you probably don't know and Kellen probably doesn't know, the two hottest regions in fashion in the world today is Africa and the Caribbean. The collective GDP of the fashion space in the Caribbean right now is $7 billion. We are not small. We have a mark to make. So because oftentimes we don't have this sort of collective forum where we can share these experiences and let people and enlighten people on who we are, the contributions that we are making, we don't often get the opportunity to make the point. So I am thankful that I had this opportunity to speak with your community today and meet the esteemed doctor as well and listen to Petra, who was the guest before. And I'm hopeful that in some way, I have learned a lot from just being here. I've learned quite a lot listening to the previous and listening to you, Doctor, and listening to you, Kellen. You're amazing in your knowledge and scope, and it's commendable. And I thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely. And Dr. Antoine, we're going to go over to you, sir, for some closing comments.
Yeah, we're at a time of just frenetic change. These are uncharted waters in the sense that there's so many what we call events in economics happening at the same time. I mean, James Carville, who advised President Clinton once said, it's all economics stupid. And I think at the end of it, when we pull all of these various influences together, where are we now in the Caribbean? Where are we now in Grenada? Where are we now in the United States as a diaspora this morning? Prices up. In the case of our Caribbean economies, the forecast for tourism, down. USAID's support to a lot of these economies, down. Where are we with remittances even before the tax? Before the tax, we saw that because of all the concerns that remittance flows would slow. So before all of the discussions on the taxes, we forecast that remittance flows would be down. And then on top of that, we have now the remittance tax on top of all of the things I've mentioned. It's a time of just, frenetic change. But I think it's a time for us to close the gaps as we've just come from the discussions on your forum this morning, so that we can strengthen our engagement. Because I think there is still in all of this, tongue-in-cheek, some may say, but a lot of opportunity. But only if we are able to tell our stories, if we are only able to speak with our own voices and our own tones where it matters most. And I think coming from the program this morning, I've made the commitment of bringing this matter up to the executive committee of the CPS on Tuesday. I've made the commitment to reach out to you through Kellan Richardson this morning on how we can build partnerships. And we've made the commitment this morning that if we do this, we will not continuously be running behind the 8 ball. We ran behind on the US measures on China-built vessels that would have crippled us. Mind you, some other economies weren't so lucky. And then we were fortunate. And we're running behind the 8 ball again on remittances. We need to be engaged in a strategic manner. What are the issues coming through the pike so we can engage with this new institutional arrangement we're talking about in a more joined up manner early enough to truly get the kind of results we want. So for me, it's a joy being on the program this morning. And I have learned as much as I've given. Kellan, every program I attend with you and I look at the comments, it helps me to fine-tune my own work at the regional level, as I've promised to fine-tune the estimates coming from what I heard from Mr. Richardson that we hadn't thought about. That some people may withdraw for fear that it's the disclosure of their personal information and personal status in the United States is not something that we had in the economic models. And I want to thank you both for that.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you. And Mr. Richardson, we do hope to have you back on the Bubb Report. So you can check out more episodes of the Bubb Report on YouTube if you haven't yet. But certainly we also want to thank Mr. Hopkin for recommending you to appear on this panel. So we certainly thank you and Dr. Entwine for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. Viewers and listeners, this has been yet another edition of the Bubb Report, and we trust that, of course, that you took away a lot of very valuable and important information from our guests, and of course the big economic implication, the big both macro and macro economic picture of what that remittance tax would look like for both Grenadians and Caribbean people who were resident in the diaspora, but those who depend on those remittances at home in Grenada. So we want to, of course, really challenge us to reflect on those. There was a Grenadian prime minister who said that we should be banning our bellies and tightening our belts. I think indeed we are in that era of banning our bellies and tightening our belts again. But how do we manage all of those issues as we attempt to do that? That is what we attempted to do here. Viewers and listeners, on behalf of the producers of the Bubb Report, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellan Bubb. We are going to see you next week. Of course, the National Democratic Congress administration is celebrating their 3rd year in office. We do have a series of programming lined up to mark that occasion. And again, what we always try to do on the Bubb Report here is to really do an examination of the performance of those in office. Yeah, of course, because of course we are here as the fourth estate to hold the powerful to account. We don't always do a good job of that, but the mark of a true journalist, there's been a lot of conversation this week about journalists versus political commentator versus pundit and whatnot. But the mark of a true journalist is one who can hold all sides to account. The mark of a true journalist is one who does not necessarily cheerlead for one side over the other. That is what makes a journalist different from just a commentator or what have you. Again, that is not a debate that I would be wading into because, as Grenadians say, I have no luck and with certain people when it comes to my public comments and things. So I'm not going to be wading into that debate. We will continue to put our heads down here on the Bubb Report and do what we're doing to educate and inform the national community. So again, on behalf of the producers of the program, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing you a pleasant week. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.